welcome to the Splash 2024 inaugural podcast of the BDA broadcast. I am your host, Greg Beaton, with my co-host,
S1E10.
And our guest today is...
Nicole Cunningham.
And what do you do, Nicole?
I am the CFO for Jack Doheny Company, or JDC.
And what brings you to Splash today?
We just recently implemented OneStream with BDA in October of 2023. So we're learning what new and exciting things are out there with OneStream.
And what new and exciting things have you found?
The latest and greatest I just heard about is narrative reporting, which I'm really excited about. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your path to where you got here today and how you implemented OneStream.
Sure. So I came to JDC in March of 2020, which March of 2020, everybody knows, right before COVID. So I always joke with the CEO that he gave me a nice time to come because we were in the midst of implementing a new ERP and then COVID hit. So it was a very interesting time. But so when I got to JDC, we implemented the new ERP and we found that the reporting was not the best. So it was really good from an operational perspective for our rental business. But we said, we need some ancillary tools. So the first thing we did was we implemented a dashboarding tool.
Okay.
It was called Sisense. And we did that in 2021. And it worked well for getting visibility KPIs to some of the managers. But we were still lacking on the reporting side. And we were really inefficient on the budgeting, the planning. We have 16 different branches, and we had built these Excel templates. So 16 Excel templates that we had to update. We did it once a year, and then we started doing a mid-year, and it was very, very time-consuming for the finance team. We don't have a big finance team at JDC. We only have 4 people, including a director of finance and then 3 financial analysts. So we need to be as efficient as possible. So we built the Excel templates knowing that we were probably going to look at some FP&A tools. So when we were happy with what came out of the Excel templates, we started looking and we talked to 3 different companies, OneStream being one of them, to move to their platform. That started around late 2022. And then we actually signed on with OneStream in 2023.
And then you met us.
And then we met you. Yeah.
So you looked at quite a few tools. You said 3. Mm-hmm. What brought you to OneStream specifically?
Well, selfishly, I had some familiarity because I had implemented it at my previous company. So even though it was a completely different business and each application is a little different because it's built towards your business, right? I at least had familiarity with the dimensionality of it, using quick views and cube view reporting. So it felt comfortable from me. And I was working with a team that didn't have any experience with this type of tool. So I leaned towards, but I tried to be fair in our evaluation process. And it really came down to, though, I felt that the other 2 tools that we looked at would have some limitations in the future, where with, some of the tools that are in the marketplace, for example, with OneStream, gave us additional capabilities that I thought we're not ready for today, but we can kind of grow into it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So when I first met you to come in, we really debated on how we were going to build this. Yeah. You presented me with a quite detailed Excel model that was high level, mm-hmm. and explained your business to me. And we debated if this was the best way for the different revenue lines and then bring in the different amount of data. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that process a little bit that we went through?
Sure. I mean, I think that having the Excel templates and building those first was the best path for us to go because we knew what we were trying to measure.
Agree.
And I feel like it gave you an easier way to translate how we were measuring the really business, right? Really but honestly, I mean, you came in and we were doing it at a higher level. So we have equipment types, right? And so we have about, let's call it 25 equipment types. And we were planning more at the equipment type level, not at the asset level, because again, it was pretty extensive in Excel and we have, 1,000+ assets in our rental fleet. So it made it feel very cumbersome to do that manually. So, when you came in and you pitched to do it on the asset level through capital planning, I was really nervous. I was like, I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, that's a lot of detail, right? Because we're talking about what are we going to buy? What are we going to sell? What we keep in the fleet? What's the utilization going to be?
Right.
At that level, it made me nervous. But when we went down that path, I mean, obviously, as with any implementation, there were things that we had to work through, but it honestly became the best way because when we were doing it at the higher level, the law of averages, right? Average rental rate, average utilization, all that stuff really made the forecast accuracy not there.
Right.
Right. So you really can't get to that unless you do it at the asset level. But and if we didn't have a tool like capital planning in OneStream, it would have been next to impossible.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the real benefit on that, we talk about all of this planning on it, gave us depreciation of all your assets for free.
That was the biggest thing. Yeah. I mean, you could probably live with the law of averages on the sales side, right? But when you get to the depreciation, it's complicated because we'd like to say that our rental model's perfect and that we hold an asset for 3 years and then we sell it. But in all honesty, it's not, and the other thing is it's definitely different for each product line. Right. So we might hold one for 2, we might hold one for 3, we might hold one for 4. So then when you're trying to average out depreciation, it's next to impossible to do. And then the next step with that, which I think going to the asset level really helped, is the balance sheet.
Right.
Because when I used to do it manually, or my team used to do it manually, I always had to do the balance sheet. And it became really cumbersome to try to figure out the rental fleet asset side of things. Because again, I was using all these averages to build the P&L.
Right. The other nice benefit that it gave you is we're talking about planning here, but you got actuals reporting out of it as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we did get actuals reporting. We got actual reporting at different levels than we could out of our ERP base plan. So we got it by region. We didn't have the region roll up before. We got by sub-account, which was kind of a painful process to go through, but we were able to do it. And then even by customer type, which we couldn't do that before too. So.
Well, and while the sub-account was a bit painful, we understand your data more. We understand that.
You got a chance to clean
but
it up.
But it really shows what brought you here, because you implement an ERP and it has all this data, but it really doesn't report on the way you need to run your business.
No. And the other thing on the reporting aspect of it is the finance team couldn't do it on their own. Like if they had a modification to the reporting, we had to go to IT. Sometimes our IT department couldn't do it, so then they had to go back to base plan and try to get them to make some changes. So now we're a little more self-sufficient, and I can say that even for myself, more self-sufficient with using quick views and trying to pull some data very quickly.
Right. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's great. Mm-hmm.
So what is the best thing that you think you found at JDC by implementing OneStream? Is it speed? Is it savings? Is it analytics?
I think it's the efficiencies in the process and the analysis that we're able to do now that we have the efficiencies. So, what I tell a lot of people is we were kind of in just data compilation mode. We were always just rushing to get things together and then, here, send it out to the ops managers or the sales guys and say, okay, here, populate it. We never had the time to actually sit back and analyze it because we were spending so much time compiling the data. So we had a lot of conversations about this with the finance team. So now, though, they have the efficiencies to where they can actually say, okay, now I have a little more time to actually analyze the data. I mean, the other thing is going through an implementation too, and starting to know your data better starts to help them understand where, our pain points are and our challenges, and try to improve the process just generally anyway.
Well, these tools are always more of a marathon than a sprint,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
It comes back to where you started, saying that you've now got a laundry list that you found at Splash.
Oh, yeah.
You want to go next. So,
yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah. And I really do honestly believe that the other two tools that we were looking at, they would have been fine, but I think that we would have been limited. Like we would have gotten planning out of it, and we did get consolidations light, call it consolidations light out of OneStream where, because before, because we have two databases in our ERP with the Canadian and the US dollar, I couldn't ever just add those two together because of the elimination. So I had to wait for my financial reporting manager to put the data together. But now it's in OneStream, and we can just kind of do all of that. And we can convert the Canadian to US dollars, which is what we do for our bank reporting.
Right.
So made all of that a lot easier.
It also gave you the ability to plan at a higher level than your actuals as well, which has been very helpful.
Yeah, it has been helpful.
So what's the favorite thing you've seen at Splash so far?
Oh, geez. I mean, I actually was really impressed by the narrative reporting. I know I already brought that up, but I think that's going to be really beneficial for us. I liked that it was free because it's in the marketplace. Now, I know that we'll probably have to tap into you guys to help us implement that. But I think that's actually going to be a time saver because even, so we have our finance team who does a lot of the month-end reporting and works with the ops and the sales guys, but I have a external financial reporting manager who's kind of just solo. She does all our bank reporting, and she hasn't really gotten into the system. I'm looking at narrative reporting as a tool for her because we can drop a lot of the bank reports because there's a lot of the words, right, that we do with the MD&A and everything that I think we can drop that into the narrative reporting, and then she'll start to actually utilize it.
Right. So I've got a question for my co-host, Ashwin. You were involved in this project. What was your favorite aspect of what we did at JDC?
I think it's a little bit more intangible. What I found at JDC was interesting that we naturally formed our buddies very naturally. It wasn't forced. It wasn't like thought through. It just fit really well. Like Nicole and you really complemented each other. Then Steve, who worked with Nicole, complemented me when we were doing the build. Then I had a team in India with Karan who kind of took some of the requirements, built everything effectively. We tapped into our product team.
It's true.
Again, Damon, who has been a product officer, actually pitched in for JDC because we saw an opportunity to do something very differently than we've seen with other customers before. And we saw that JDC was committed, had an appetite for this. Like Nicole was alluding to earlier, you're very cautiously optimistic about the detailed capital assets planning that JDC had required, and you were actually kind of satisfied with doing it a bit higher level, but we kind of saw some potential. We showed you that option, and you were excited, we were excited. So the great collaboration, which didn't feel forced or the typical tug of war, wasn't there. So it made people come fully to work and deliver. So I was really happy about that. So.
Yeah, I can add to that though too, because you took the templates that we built, you took our input on what we wanted to do from a planning perspective, and you translated it in ways that I probably wouldn't have done myself. You know what I'm saying? Because even we talk a lot about the rental assets, right? But even compensation planning, right? That was another avenue that I didn't even think about, putting in the labor utilization in there, and then the bill rates and the internal rates, so we could actually just build it that way through compensation planning. But you guys came up with that thought, knowing that's how we built the Excel templates. And I didn't, and that was something I'd used at my previous company, was compensation planning, and we didn't utilize that, right? So that was neat.
It's part of the way we work at BDA. We try to be a partner with you, right? So I always come in and I try to put myself in your shoes. I was in FP&A for years too. So if I was running this business, what would I need? I need to provide that to you. So the different perspective is great.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, like, what would you advise, other CFOs like yourself who are going through this journey? And, it's pretty intimidating, I would think. Like, you do these conferences or you go to some events, you still don't know, right, what you're getting into, especially when it's new to you.
Yeah.
Like, I know, like, I can appreciate that you went through a few cycles before, getting into OneStream, but what would you advise to the audience out there?
So it's funny because I just went to dinner with somebody who is not a current customer, but they're contemplating, right? And last night, and my advice to them was get your Excel templates like ready to where you can say, okay, now I want to take these and I want to put them in a platform, right? Because I feel like that is really beneficial, because we went through a lot of iterations in Excel before we ended up saying, okay, now we're ready, right? Because there was a lot of different, okay, we thought this would work, that didn't work, but here we're comfortable, right? With it. I think that's my biggest advice, because you can't automate dysfunction. You don't want to automate dysfunction, right? So you need to make sure it's working, and then you can easily say, here. This is what and it'll tweak, right? It'll change a little bit. But I think that's my biggest piece of advice when you're starting down this process. And then, then you can share it with the people that you talk to and say, how would this tool handle these types of things? Because that's exactly what we did.
And it put us on a common footing. When I came in, I understood what you were trying to say. Too.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And we don't always see that level of effort from some of our clients putting in, right? The systems are very capable, but you have to customize them to your system.
Well, it takes time.
Right.
You have to prioritize the time to do it.
That's right.
Right. And it
be
takes
committed.
time.
Yeah. Right. And I would argue that some of this actually, if anything, I love the point that you made. Like if it's not organized or it's not, if there's a dysfunction, it actually accentuates that. It makes it bigger than it is when you get into a tool, if you're not ready for it, because it's accelerated, because everybody's looking at it now, right? So it's very vulnerable thing. Like being an author, trying to author, like, here's what I want to do is a very vulnerable moment. So very few customers are like very committed because it's so busy with the day job and the day-to-day operations. So it's so difficult, but this was highly critical, I would say, to the success of JDC. So appreciate that, you're bringing up that. So
I was thinking about your previous comment about your buddies. So your buddy Steve isn't here right now to talk to, but I want your take on. Steve was new to this before. He had never seen a tool like this that we all understood. How does he like the tool now?
He really likes the tool now. I think it took him a minute to feel comfortable and confident with it, right? He knew it. I think he just needed you guys to give him the confidence that he knew it. Right. So, and I pushed him a little bit. Right. And I knew, when I selected him to be the lead, right, because I didn't have time to do it. When I selected him to be the lead, I had a conversation with him. I said, this is going to probably take you a little bit outside your comfort zone, but it'll be good for you. Right. So he was a little nervous, but coming here, especially because he's here and he's in a session right now, I think he gets excited and he starts to think about, we were in the narrative reporting session earlier and he's like, wow, this is really cool. We could really do this and that. I got to get some cube views built. So he's starting to see that forward looking now that he built that confidence, because he didn't even have, even I've used OneStream in the past, but prior to that, I used Hyperion. So again, your common themes. Right? So he hadn't even used that in his previous lives. So, but I think he's there now, and I brought in a new director of finance in August, and I'll tell you what, he's picked up on it really well already, so.
It shows you the ease of use when you build it properly, right?
I think once you understand the whole dimensionality concept, you got it, right? Yes. There's like a little, there's still some things that you have to learn, but when you understand the backbone in which it's built.
It's true.
Then I'll go back to your other question too. That's the other thing that I said to the guy last night when I was talking to him at dinner. The Excel templates was a big thing, but understand what you want to plan off of.
Exactly.
Right? Because that's how you're going to build your dimensions.
It has to be relatable, basically.
Yeah.
Once
Don't
you relate
go too
to
detailed though either. You can go down to the SKU. Do you want to go down to the SKU? Do you want to go down to customer name? And, so when we implemented at my previous company, OneStream, we went down to customer name. And it was great, but sometimes not so great.
Right.
It made things a lot more complex. So I think you just have to think about how you want to build that backbone.
Right. There's also different ways of how you're gonna build that as well. So you could think of the idea if we put all of this detail to fixed assets in, right? So we summarized it for reporting, but in the math, it's actually in the detail level that you don't need to do that as a user, right? So that's one of the great things about OneStream, that you can architect it this way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, I hear a lot in some of these presentations about people not trusting the data, right? And I think I told you guys this the other day that when we were doing a kind of more of a high level what if earlier this year, it wasn't an official forecast, but we were treating it like a forecast in OneStream. We did it in OneStream because we were doing the LRP, so the 5-year. We did it in OneStream, and then I took it out and I did it outside of OneStream. And the numbers in my calculation were so close. It was immaterial. Like the difference was immaterial, but then that just gave us an extra level of trust in the data. Like I believed it, right? You know, because I knew the actuals were coming in. Obviously, you tie that out. But talking about the longer range planning and saying, is this working the way that we built it to? Take it outside of the system, recalculate it, and now I can say, listen, I've calculated it manually. It's calculating the same way in the system. I trust the data. You know, that only takes once, you know.
It's true.
It really does.
It's true. You know, I've met a lot of clients who like reconciling, and they do it monthly. And I always try to encourage them to reconcile the system once and then go forward with it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that you got there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
I
really
mean, sure, there's been like things that are going to happen post go live, right? That we've worked with you guys through and everything like that. And what I can say is, to your point about the reconciliation, is you can test it once. If something's going to happen, it's probably not going to be some small it's going to be something, you know, like you're going to see. You're going to notice, like some trend's going to be off or something, right?
The way you described that was something I learned in my FP&A career. I was always in the weeds of models. They could have been in Excel or Hyperion, and I put a lot of time and effort into this.
Yeah.
And I'd go talk to my CFO about it. He would do what I called napkin math and tell me I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I would be perplexed. I was like, I spent 40 hours on this. You told me I was wrong in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But that's what you have to do. And you have to make sure that these systems tie to that high level check that the finance professionals all do off the top of their heads.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been great. So we're almost out of time.
Okay.
Have you got any words of advice for anyone or any parting thoughts or...
I think my best words of advice for anybody I talk to that's in the finance realm, whether or not you're a controller, a CFO, director of finance, whatever, is just always look for that continuous improvement, right, in the process. My team hates it when I tell them to do time studies, but I tell them to do time studies because I want to find inefficiencies in our process. Because the first thing that somebody wants to do when they're saying, oh, we're working too much, you know, and I need to hire somebody. Well, I'll say, I'm sorry, no, you're not going to hire somebody. Let's talk about what you're doing and where you're spending the most time. Sure. And I say that because the vast majority of the time, you're going to find a way to find efficiencies in technology.
Sure.
Whether or not it's OneStream or some other tool, right? It's usually going to be technology. And then when you introduce that technology, guess what? They don't need that extra money.
True.
Right. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice is always challenge your team to find that continuous improvement. Where are your inefficiencies in your process? You'll find it. You'll find it.
Well, thanks, Nicole. Yeah. It's been great having you. And I look forward to working on narrative reporting with you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.